fellow there, I got hit by, or my helmet got hit by a piece of shrapnel. Hit kind of on the side of my helmet there, put a dent in it, and ripped the net, camouflage net that I had on it. Didn't bother me any, but it sounded like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer, and it couldn't have been because it just made a little dent in my helmet. But there was one fella there that got hit on the ankle bone, like under his boot. And his boot, it didn't even go through the boot leather, but it hit him, and I know it hurt. But he just laid down and went to screaming that his foot was gone. And a guy named Chapman tried to tell him that his foot, said there's no blood, your foot's not going, you're not hurt. And he just kept screaming and crying that I know my foot's gone, I can't get up. And Chapman argued with him a little bit, and then says, well, if you want to be hurt, I'll hurt you. And he kicked him right in the ribs. And he said, I heard ribs break, I don't know. And I just walked on. I have no idea what happened to the man. Chapman didn't know. But anyway, he said, if you want to be hurt, I'll hurt you. And we went on, and we got, our officers led us a little too fast, and we got into our own barrage and a few of the shells the Germans were throwing. They always told us that the Germans were shelling us, that there weren't any Allied rounds falling short, or that we hadn't been led into our own barrage. But when an artillery shell that's firing in a certain direction, when it hits the dirt and explodes, it'll throw dirt out in front of it. And I seen a lot of it that was going forward the same direction I was going, so I know it was our artillery. But nevertheless, it never, we didn't have too many casualties. And I seen they always say that the enemy will kill prisoners, shoot prisoners, and so forth, but your own side never does that. Well, that's absolutely wrong. Anybody that has been in the infantry any length of time and been in any attacks, I'd almost guarantee you has been told, we take no prisoners. Well, if they're told that, and you take no prisoners, what are you going to do with them? You got to shoot them. And fortunately, I never had to do that. I've seen it done. I saw it done in that attack. They put prisoners, they had a big long trench, not just slit trench, but a big long trench. And they put German prisoners, not any great big amount of them. I'm not talking about 300 or 400, I'm talking about 10 or 15 at the most. They laid them down in that trench, made them get in that trench and lay down, and one of the little Chaudières, and the Chaudière Regiment was, I was glad to get out of them. They were the meanest little, they were all trappers, fishermen, loggers, and so forth from northern Quebec, and they were, all of them had been stomped with logging boots and cut, and they were mean. I mean mean. And this one guy, when they had the Germans in the trench, he was up on top, and he took a Bren gun, and just walk down the line of firing, and when he'd use up a magazine, he'd take it off and throw it down, clip on another one, and start shooting and walking. So I seen that, and I'll get ahead of my story a little bit, but I mentioned before Clarence Peck that was 2 numbers difference in serial numbers. My number was 234 and his was 232, and when we were getting ready to get on the boats, I had seen him, but he went to the Winnipeg Rifles, and at Carper Cay Airport a day or 2 before we took it, there had been another attack on it, and he had been in it, and he was stood against the hangar wall and machine gunned. Him and I think 7 or 8 other Winnipeg Rifles by the German 12th SS, Hitler's Jugend, all young kids. The average age of them, I think, was 17 and a half. But this colonel, their colonel, Kurt Meyer, he was flat mean, and they'd captured some Winnipeg Rifles, and Peck among them, and he had been stood up against the wall and machine gunned. That was the official, and I've got an official list here of the Winnipeg Rifles that died in the war, and his name is listed as murdered in Carper Cay Airport. But to get back to my part of it, when we were advancing, we came to a field of beets, livestock feed beets. They were in ridges. The dirt had been they stood up probably 15, 16 inches above the ground, the tops of them, and there was dirt piled up almost that high. The beets were big, long things, and they used them for livestock feed. But anyway, these beet rows, we started across this field, is where they had some agriculture in the edge of the airport, and they told us to pause for a while. I don't know whether it was for the artillery to rearrange, or I don't know what it was, but anyway, they told us to pause, to lay down, and I got between a couple of these rows of beets. They were probably 2.5 feet apart, maybe, I don't remember for sure. But I got between 2 of those rows, and I thought, well, if a machine gun bullet or a rifle bullet or a piece of shrapnel or whether it's going to have to come from in front or behind me, from the sides, I've got that mound of dirt to protect me, that'd stop about anything. And I was feeling pretty good there, and I felt something underneath me, and it felt like it was raising me clear above the top of that rows of beets. And the German propaganda, the Mary of Arnhem and Lord Haw Haw and all the other propagandists had told us that the Allies had had it so easy till now, but the time was coming shortly that the troops would never know where death was coming from. It might come from above, it might come from the side, one side or the other, or below. You never know, but it will come. And we won't be just thrown back into the ocean now, we'll be annihilated. And after so many days of hearing that stuff, you almost get to, you believe it. And I could feel something under me raising up, and I thought, good heavens, it's some kind of an underground secret weapon. As I said, it felt like it was raising me clear above the dirt there. So I rolled over into the next row real quick, and over the top of those beets and into the next 2 rows of beets, and looked back, and all it was an old mole crawling along there. All the artillery shells and so forth hitting the ground and vibrating. He was probably more scared than I was. But there's no way to describe how high that mole just crawling under me was lifting me in my head. But
half inch in reality.
I think that was probably the most scared I ever was in the whole action. Was nothing but a mole crawling under my belly. And but we went on, and Tommy Netto and I weren't too far apart ever, but there was an old building of some kind. It looked like an old pin barn, I mean, with post and beam barn or whatever. It was completely demolished, and we come to another little pause, and I got in amongst that wood from that barn. There was big beams and so forth laying there all tangled up, and I got in that and thought, well, that'll give me some protection. But the Germans were firing some airburst, and I guess it was Germans. It could have been ours, I don't know, but I assume it was German. An airburst is, they're set to explode so high above the ground, and they have a proximity fuse. Whenever how they work, I don't know, but whenever they get so close to the ground, 100 yards, 50 yards, or whatever, they'll explode. And there was one of them exploded pretty much above me, and I felt one of the beams that I was leaning against or laying against shake, and heard a thud, and behind me, and I looked, and right beside my feet was a big beam, and there was a piece of a shell that had just unwrapped and looked about as much like an axe blade as anything else. Had chopped into that beam, and it was maybe 3 or 4 inches from my ankle, which if it had hit me, it would have just cut it off like doing it with an axe. Anyway, it didn't. And when we got a little bit farther on, they told us to stop again for a while. And there was a little underground bunker of some kind. I suppose it was an ammunition bunker, but I don't know. It had some steps down to it. It was maybe 7 or 8, 10 feet underground, and it was about probably 4 by 4, inside with a door in front of it at the steps, and concrete sides on the steps like basement steps, concrete sidewalls and concrete steps, and a drain in the bottom of it, and then the doors there to open to go in. And Tommy and Edo and I thought, well, we'll go down in there and we'll sit down in there. Well, a shell had hit close enough that the door and the door frame and everything, it was all blown inside of the building, just wrecked there. And we kind of picked it out because we thought one shell had hit in there, probably another one wouldn't. And we went down in there and we sat down in there a little bit and lit a cigarette, and I said, I believe I'll throw some of this stuff out and give us a little more room to sit on the floor and lean back. Well, I picked up a piece of the door frame, picked it up to throw it out, and when I did, there was an explosion, and there'd been a mine, booby trap mine, put down in that drain. So that anybody that walking on that steps and opened that door, it had been right square under him. But the explosion went out, and above Tommy and I, because we were sitting down, had we been standing up, we probably would have been hurt. There was hardly room to stand up in that little cubicle, whatever it was. But anyway, it didn't hurt us, except it deafened both of us. We couldn't hear anything for several hours. But then they came past and said that we were to move on, motioned us to come on. And we went on up to the hangars, around the hangars of the airport, and were told to dig in, that we were going to spend the night there. And Tommy and I started digging our trench. When we got the trench dug, I thought, well, I'm going to have a smoke. And I reached in my pocket and took out that pack of cigarettes, and there was one cigarette in it. During that attack, I don't know how many hours, it was before dark, but it was, we'd been several hours walking across there. And I had smoked an entire 25 pack of cigarettes, and I don't remember ever lighting but the first one and the last one.
All right, you're going.
Whenever we got dug slit trenches up by the hangars, administration buildings and so forth in the airport, Carpenter Cay Airport, that night it came a really violent thunderstorm. The most thunderstorm biggest thunderstorm that I ever saw in all the time I was on the European continent. And I thought at the time when lightning was crashing around and thunder, there was no artillery fire or anything at that time. I thought how peaceful it sounded. I'd just been used to days of artillery fire, and when we went into the airport, it was artillery fire and machine gun fire. But when that thunderstorm hit, I thought that's the most peaceful thing I've ever heard. And it actually was the most violent thunderstorm I saw on the European continent. But it's just the way things happen, the way you think. And we were told, we were there, I think 2 days. And the second night, and maybe the first night, I can't remember for sure, but we were supposed to go out and carry mines out in front toward the German lines from where we were, and they were going to put up a minefield there. They were metal mines, anti-tank mines, anti-personnel, anything. About as big as a dinner plate, something like that, and had a handle on them. You could carry two of them real easy, and we'd carry them out there so far and turn them over to somebody, to the engineers, I guess it was. Then we'd go back and get another bunch of them, and one trip we made when we were going out with the mines, the Germans opened up with mortars. And the Germans had a 6-barrel electronically fired mortar. We called them moaning minis. They just sounded like something winding up when they fired one barrel at a time, but it was like a probably 5 or 6 inch diameter barrel, and they fired them. They were rockets, really. They called them mortars, but they were really rockets that was fired, and they made a horrible sound. But anyway, you could always tell when there were going to be a bunch of them coming down, because you'd hear them go off, and they'd just go off one barrel at a time, screaming, and they started. And our trenches were back toward the buildings there, and we just more or less dropped our mines and headed back there, and you didn't worry whether you was going toward your trench or what. You could see a black place on the ground, and you knew that was an open trench, and you just went in it. And the one I got in was made for 2 men and possibly 3 to stand in there. But when those mortars hit, they didn't hit as close as we thought they were going to. But anyway, there were 6 of us in that trench. I mean, sardines was riding Pullman class to what we were. We were just tangled up and stacked up in there. But they hit, some of them hit the buildings and some of them hit out toward where we had been, but they didn't get anybody. And then I don't remember exactly where we went after we left that airport. They had moved on forward. Somebody else had gone on through us and driven the Germans back, and we went back, and that was July the 4th, and probably the 6th or something, we left that place, and just a day or two after that, the word came that we were to go to our originally slated outfits, and we all drifted off to, I think there was 4 of us, Tommy Dedo and Bruce Peer and I and 1 or 2 others. I can't remember who they were, that went to the Highland Light Infantry, but they went to other regiments in the 3rd Division. But anyway, when I got to the Highland Light Infantry, while they were doing the paperwork and so forth, they said, wanted to know if I had any, well, before they asked me if I had any preference, they said, we need, really bad, we need stretcher bearers, and said, first aid men, and want to know if any of us had had any training in that, and none of the ones of us did. And they said, well, what training have you had? And I said, well, I'm a mortar man. I've had 3-inch mortar training, and they wanted to see my pay book, and said, well, we need some mortar men too. Said you can go to the mortars. And they brought in, when I was there at the regimental headquarters, they brought in a wounded Canadian sergeant, had been shot in the chest by a sniper, and he had been a mortar man, but they said I could go to the mortars, and told me who to go check with and so forth, and I don't remember. Tommy Netto and Bruce Peer went to a rifle company, but I went to the mortars, and I stayed with them then till the war was over. And I had to take a little bit more, well, just brush up. It wasn't training really, but from the time I had left Canada in February of '44 until June or July of '44, they had put an extra charge on mortar, 3-inch mortar rounds, and they were good for about 600 more yards of distance than what I had trained on. I mean, it was nothing. All I done was poke the bomb down the barrel and help the number one on the mortar to get the sights adjusted, and I just poked the bombs down the barrel. So it wasn't anything that I had to really learn, but I didn't have to specify the charges or anything like that. I just, what they handed me, I poked down the barrel. But we stayed around there in that place for a little while. I don't remember, a couple of days maybe, and that was D+36, which would have made it about the 12th of July. When I went there, then we actually capturing Caen, the town of Caen, was supposed to have been done D-Day. That was one of the places that was supposed to be captured D-Day, but they got within a few miles of it, but they never got it. And it wasn't captured actually until after sometime in July, was because I was with the Highland Light Infantry when we took Caen, and I was out of the rifle companies then, but all the time that I was in the rifle company, the 36 days that I was in the Chaudière, or 35 days in the rifle company, I never fired my rifle. There never was a German in front of me that I could shoot at in all that time. On each side of me, they could see him, but platoon that I was with in the Chaudière, I don't think there was 15, there were 34 of us when we went to the Chaudière, 30 men and 4 sergeants. And when we went to our designated units, after on D plus 36, there was 15 of us left. But as far as I know, unless some of them died of wounds later, there was none of that bunch that was ever killed. And as far as I know, none of them ever fired their rifles. And we were lucky. Like I said, that one attack, we went into a little town where Tommy Netto and I were out in front of the regiment to draw fire. Our platoon wasn't shot at all. The ones on each side of us were shot at and everything, and they had to fire rifles and machine guns, and there was nobody in front of us. So that was, I never had to look at a man and shoot him. I could have, because if it had been out there in front of me, if I hadn't shot him, he'd shot me. But I was lucky enough, and I never had to shoot a man that I was looking at, I'm sure. And firing mortars that, the mortar bombs that I fired killed, I don't know how many, have no idea, but I know we killed German troops and wounded them, but I never had to see them after I'd done it. So that's one thing I'm thankful for. I don't, I could have done it and it wouldn't have bothered me any, but I'm just glad I didn't have to do it. But